As I mentioned earlier, I'm sure Rich Mironov needs no real introduction here, given I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with his work. He's a 40-year veteran of Silicon Valley. He's worked with 6 startups of his own and has advised and coached countless product managers over the years. He'll be talking to us today about managing misaligned stakeholders. Welcome, Rich.
Wonderful, thanks. I really appreciate being able to join, and I hope you're having a good afternoon or evening wherever you are. Here on the west coast of the US, it's actually early morning. So we'll dive in. And let me set this talk up just a little bit. Some of you may know that I do a lot of coaching of heads of product and working with executive teams on how to get good product hygiene working. This is going to come right out of that discussion. So let's move right ahead. You can see there's some misalignment already here in our roadmap. Mostly when I encounter sort of first-time product managers, product owners, one of the very first things everybody wants to do is to prioritize the backlog, because that's what the Scrum book says we're supposed to do. And so we have some chart like the one at the right, which is about effort and value, and we jump right into the problem of trying to sort things. I'm going to pull us back a little bit and observe that ticket level or story level prioritization actually doesn't work very well. It doesn't make much sense unless we've got some things above and around that that really help us do the right thing. So obviously you need a product strategy, because otherwise it's impossible to figure out what's important to the strategy. And we'll be talking a lot about a sort of technology portfolio or investment of software work, because you really need to divide up your prioritization among several different kinds of categories. And then finally, you need someone who can make final decisions, who's not just a stakeholder. And we're going to be spending a lot of time on stakeholders, because my observation here is that the different functional groups, sales, marketing, engineering, support, actually have very predictable biases. They each see the world very differently because they in fact sample the market in very different ways. So we're going to take that apart. And then here's really the opening thoughts. There's lots of requests that you get as a product manager, as a product owner, or someone else sitting in that place. And I will tell you that they're not only in different categories, but they come with different metrics. They're not all scalable on the same scale. You can't just measure them against euros or efficiency. They come in different flavors, right? I will try to paint for you the idea here that your internal stakeholders, the different departmental groups, are actually naturally misaligned. They're going to lobby against each other. They're going to push against each other. They really don't want the same things. So if you're waiting for some moment when all of your stakeholders agree and want to sign off on your backlog because they all think it's perfect, I think you've got a lot of waiting ahead of you. Third thing, I will tell you that sorting individual tickets doesn't create strategy, right? Strategy helps drive our sorting of the tickets. The tickets themselves almost never form into a strategy. So we have to have one, right? And then last thought here is I really expect my stakeholders, even if we get good agreement on any particular moment, to forget what we agreed to come back later and disagree. And importantly, most of the folks in our companies don't really believe in the exclusive or principle. Exclusive or, of course, means that we can do one thing or another. Most of them believe in the exclusive and principle, which says we can do everything on the roadmap and this one more thing, which won't be too hard. It's probably only 10 lines of code. I bet we can sneak it into this week's sprint, right? That will always be the answer we get, particularly from the go-to-market side of the house. So let's unpack this a little bit. That's a bucket on the side, and I'm going to talk a little bit about buckets. Here's my observation about tickets. It's really hard to prioritize or rank order things that aren't the same. So I know that in every one of your backlogs, you've got lots of bugs to fix and lots of minor features that people want to add. Those are really in different dimensions or different set of uses. Right? We've got some single customer or deal specific integration to somebody else's team versus UI improvements. Again, different animals. It's pretty hard to compare those things because they are measured on different kinds of return on investment. So I'm going to suggest, before we get to our stakeholders and why they're misaligned, that the right way to approach this problem is to create a small number of buckets or groups, or as we'll see, we'll call them pie slices, and to put similar things together so that we can then rank or rate or prioritize related things. So if we only have room for 3 features in the next release of our product and we have 19 features to consider, at least they're all features and we can see whether they're going to drive revenue or user adoption. And we want to keep those separate from the bugs we fix, P0, P1, P2, P3, right? We want to make sure we're fixing bugs in every sprint and we don't trade that away for some features. Likewise, your company probably has some things you do that are really just for one customer. If you're in the enterprise space, as I am, I think every single customer deal comes with something special that the sales team tells us is for the whole market, but we really know is just for that one customer. And then finally, and we'll emphasize this again and again in the next half hour, time and energy to do real validation. So as product folks, I'll repeat over and over again, it's our obligation, it's our need, it's our job to go out and talk directly with real end users who are paying us for our product, not just hearing what our sales team or marketing team or executive team tells us. And so we need to make time and space and save energy for validation or discovery or experiments or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we've set up really 2 problems here. One is how to divide our energy across different kinds of issues. And the other is how to deal with the stakeholders who, again, I can assure you, won't agree on the plan, regardless of what the plan is. So let's take that in order. And this is a pie chart I use all the time. By the way, there's something magical about pie charts when we're using them with executive teams. And that's this. The nature of a pie chart is that if you want to make the green slice bigger, you have to make another slice smaller. So that's unlike bar charts or line charts. Pie charts naturally point us toward trade-offs and portfolios and balances because we can't have more of everything. Some of you may know this. I have a really long talk that I'll send the link out later, but I've never met a development team anywhere in the world at any company in any industry that had all of the resources to do all of the things that the executives and the customers wanted us to do. It will never happen in this world. So we as product folks are always making trade-offs. We're always making exclusive or choices. This is my typical pie chart. Of course, nothing's perfect and it all depends. But if I were looking at an enterprise software company, so this is a company that actually sells software for money as their primary business to B2B enterprise companies, this is kind of a healthy pie. What you see is about half, the green slice, about half of all the work our engineering team does, whether we measure those in story points or strawberries or engineered days or anything else, roughly about half of our energy, our effort, our work is going to go toward things that customers see and ask for by name. So that's new features, that's new integrations, that's new markets, improvements to our user experience, et cetera. Things that customers send us tickets for, things that executives at our customers hold us up for, things that come up in the sales cycle. Half, not 90%. The red slice is all the things we have to do if we're in the software business to stay in the software business that customers don't ask us for unless we've messed up. So in general, our customers don't call us up and ask for more scalability because we should have it already and we should understand the trajectory of our sales and usage. We should always have our scalability and security and infrastructure and architecture in place before we need it. When I see companies that have a much smaller red slice here, I expect them to be out of business within a few quarters. In this same slice, I would put all of the quality and fixes and test automation. This is everything we need to do behind the scenes because customers don't write us tickets or stories or requests that ask for better architecture. They only ask for features. The last 2 things at the top, you can see a gray slice. Again, because I'm an enterprise guy, I know that every deal that comes in the door has someone lobbying or demanding or screaming for something that's not on the roadmap. And if we let that gray slice get too big, it turns out we're not in the product business anymore. We're in the professional services or custom development or bespoke business, because that gray slice eats the pie. And then we no longer get products out for lots of customers. And at the very bottom, we have all the validation exercises. It's small because it doesn't actually take a lot of time, but usually that's the very first thing to trade away if we've got promises to customers we forgot about. Okay, so this is a balanced portfolio, and we'll come back to it at the end after we talk about some of our stakeholders. Okay, so because this is really about how to understand, maybe even love our stakeholders, even though they drive us crazy a lot. Okay, so let's take them one at a time. Here's a salesperson. I don't actually know what she sells, and it doesn't matter, but you can see that she's on the line. She's expressing with her hands. She's a salesperson, right? What is it that sales wants out of our allocation? What do they see? And what are their biases? And here by bias, I'm really thinking about sampling or selection bias, where they don't see the whole world. They just see the part of the world that sales sees. And the part of the world they see is the most recent pre-sales issue. So if you're a salesperson, you're very motivated by money. We don't pay you to be a strategist or think about the whole market. What you remember is the last 1 or 2 or 3 calls you were on and what happened. And if you didn't win the sale, what was the reason that the customer gave you, right? And the metric they use is, of course, current quarter revenue. So if we left this up to our sales team only, we would only work on things that were going to close deals this quarter, and we would take whatever list they had, right? So why is that okay, or why is that not okay? We hear things that look like this, right? This missing feature lost us the deal, or some really big customer is going to quit our service if we don't promise to do something, right? If we step back a little bit, let's think just a little about the psychology and the biases that we see in most sales forces. I've surveyed a lot of sales teams in my day. And as you heard, I've been doing the product management thing for almost 40 years. So I've seen a lot of sales forces. And what I've learned over and over again is that when we ask the sales team why we won an important deal, we almost always hear that it's because they're great salespeople. And when we ask them why we lost an important deal, it's almost always because we were missing a feature or the price was too high, right? Notice this is not symmetric. This is not standard. This is not average. The selection bias is that we almost never hear from sales why we made a deal, why the features we put in were good, how we improved the product and it led to revenue. We mostly hear about the lost sales, and they never really seem to take credit for it themselves. It's a product issue. Okay, so what we're going to see from sales, the natural bias, the natural lens they see the world in, is going to be current quarter, missed features. We're one feature away from all the sales I need. Okay, let's take another group. Marketing. Here's my new marketing box, and you can see that we've just announced that I don't know what our product is, but it now has Bitcoin support and machine learning, because the marketing team really wants mostly to get people into the top of the funnel for lead generation, right? So the marketing bias is they're looking for headline features and benefits that are going to excite a lot of people in our target audience to get them to show up for a webinar or download a white paper or reach out to our customer base, right? So they're really not caring so much about the internals of the product. They're looking for the benefit at the very first line of the subject of the email, right? And the metric they have is, of course, top of funnel, right? How do we get more people to raise their hands and tell us they would like to learn more about our product so we can turn them over to the sales team, right? And so we see things like this, right? Not very useful. Some competitor supports Azure. Well, whatever that means, I'm not sure, right? Or, right, you see here, we did a panel discussion. We talked about AI or machine learning. A lot of people signed up. So it must be that we should put more machine learning into our product, right? And it's not that I don't support marketing's point of view. It's that marketing is almost always going to be lobbying for very visible announcements about cool features, honestly, whether users and customers need them or not, right? Again, the bias that we see pretty uniformly from marketing teams isn't about function, isn't about feature, it's about benefits. Okay, let's take a few more. Support, here's somebody on the support team. What do they normally sample for? Well, the support team, of course, gets calls from current paying customers, right? So who don't they talk with? They don't talk with prospects. They don't talk with customers who've churned away. They don't talk with people who are in other market segments or that we haven't addressed yet or that might be interested in our product, right? Their sampling bias is current customers on support contracts with problems that are big enough that are worth opening a ticket, right? And the way they measure the world, of course, is how do we reduce the number of tickets or outages so we're not so extra busy, right? So what we'll hear from support, right? We'll hear about new users and sign-ins and workflows. We'll hear about data issues. We'll hear about things. And in general, the support team is being held up by the customers who need an answer by close of business tomorrow. Again, notice we've now had 3 groups that each sample the world in a very different way, and they're going to have completely different views about what's important. All right, let's do a couple more, and then we'll come back and make some sense out of this, right? Engineering, I don't know if this is your engineering leader, but I've worked with him before, right? And the engineering team, of course, feels the pain of building software. So they worry about tech debt and architecture and microservices and replatforming and all of the things that would make their jobs easier. Notice they're not talking to customers at all, right? And the metric that they have is how do we get more into each sprint that's going to make development smoother, right? Make our jobs easier. And that's a great thing. We really, really want our engineers to be able to be more productive and happier, right? So we see quotes like this, right? I'm not even sure I understand them all completely, but I wrote them down, right? We need to refactor things. We've got different API approaches. We're worried about transaction volumes or throughputs or data sources, right? Notice this is completely different from what we hear from sales and marketing and support, right? We've got one more set of misaligned stakeholders, which is, of course, every company has executives. So here's our executive. Not sure if anyone's remembering this TV show, but made a big impression on me. And what do our executives want? First of all, we should know that our executives have a very, very narrow sampling bias. Almost all the people they talk to are either the largest prospects that our sales team has passed over to the CEO so they can close the deal, or the very largest customers who are already customers and have some complaint about the system. So I know that my executives are going to over-index on the very largest customers and what those very few customers tell us, right? Because executives have deep, deep recency bias. For those who don't know that phrase, that means they can only remember their last 2 or 3 conversations with customers, and everything else is kind of washed out of their heads because they're in meetings all day and it's really ADHD, okay? And the metric for many executives, particularly at enterprise software companies, is how do we close a deal today? And engineering and product and support will figure out how to handle that deal once we've closed it. So there's a lot of pressure that comes from executive teams to agree to things that are one-offs and specials and not on the roadmap. It may even be very, very difficult to build, but they're going to close a deal today. So the quotes we usually hear from executives, things like this. Well, Mercedes is a top 5 customer, so we should give them whatever we want, right? They told me this is easy, so we should give them whatever they want, right? One customer told us they were interested in single sign-on. Typically we generalize that to the whole world. So maybe we only got one request, but at this moment, our executive bias is that everybody probably wants what our biggest customer asked for. Again, just pulling back from a moment, what we're seeing here is that the different groups within our company are going to have very different preferences, very different priorities, very different selection bias for what they see is happening in the market, right? And that's critical then, because when we come back to what product folks actually do, it's going to be our job to set a roadmap, set priorities, make choices. Exclusive OR means 90% of the requests won't ever get done. But the sampling bias of each of our stakeholders means we can't let any one of those groups make all the decisions for us, because then we'll have a broken or tilted or biased product plan. So if we come back to our pie chart, remember our pie chart? So here's how this plays out from a politics point of view, right? On the left, on the green side, which is all the customer features, generally we'll see our sales and marketing and executive team want us to make that green half bigger than half, right? 80%, 90%, right? The engineering and support teams, along with product and probably design, are going to be pushing to have a bigger red slice, because we feel the pain of defects and architecture and refactoring and tech debt and all that stuff. So there's a pretty large group pushing for the red slice to be bigger, right? At the top, we know that really talented salespeople are persuasive and they're persistent. And basically, we're paying, at least enterprise sales teams, we're paying them to break the roadmap, to hijack the roadmap, to push in a bunch of special things for single customers, because that's how individual sales teams get paid. And they really do want to get paid. And at the bottom, what we see is very few of us pushing, lobbying for more energy and time on discovery and validation. Mostly it's the product and design teams who don't really have a seat at the executive table, right? So what we see here is we see a dynamic tension where different groups in the company are actually pushing for opposing priorities, right? So what do we do with this? One or two more thoughts, right? First of all, as I said, I think product management's fundamental job is to figure out how to do this in an appropriate way, a balanced way, which means we as product folks must be talking directly with end users and end buyers all the time. My metric for when I parachute into a company as the head of product, which I've done 12 or 13 times, is I ask everyone on the product team how many customers, users they spoke with in the last 2 weeks that were not sales calls. They weren't pushing, they were listening and learning. And anybody who gives me an answer of less than one of those interviews a week, we've got to fix it, right? We've got to figure out how to get our product managers talking directly with and listening to customers at least once a week for every single person on the product team, no excuses. Okay, so why is that important? This is something I call the good idea train. And you may see this train pull up in your Slack channel or your email, or if you were back in the office, maybe it's post-it notes on your screen. But every single product person in the world gets hundreds and hundreds of good ideas every day. Now, we get them from everyone. You can see the list. By the way, we can't do hundreds of things every day. We're probably only going to get 2 or 3 things into next week's sprint. So what do we do with those hundreds of ideas? We have to find very polite ways of saying no to the idea. We still love the people who brought those ideas, but we're saying no to the idea, right? And then the other part of this is when we establish a process for submitting ideas, the folks at the end of that who are going to fill out forms believe that if they fill out the form, we'll say yes. Clearly, that's not true. No matter what process we follow, almost all requests will not be approved, will not be fulfilled, because they're 20 times or 50 times as big as our best guess for engineering throughput. Okay, so let's look at a couple of solutions here. First off, I'd say, I really want my product managers directly talking, as I've said, with customers, because every time we translate what a customer told a salesperson, told a field engineer, who then told somebody in marketing, who then wrote it down in Salesforce. Anytime we're using proxies between the product people themselves and the customers, we're losing data. Here's the handoff, right? Specs are incomplete. It's second hand, third hand, fourth hand, right? Whenever we as product folks are getting our requirements internally and not checking them with customers, we should assume they're probably 1/3 or more wrong. Okay, so what do we do? What to do? Here's a little balance. I'll tell 2 very quick stories about how we get stakeholders to help us in the exclusive or trade-offs instead of fight us. And the way we do that, we go back to our pie slices and we say, well, who are the folks who need that pie slice the most? And can we have them help us prioritize within that category? So with our support team, who has an infinite number of bugs to fix, right? We might have a discussion that looks like this. Every week, we're going to put 45 story points against bug fixes. That's our plan every single week. We'd love your help figuring out which of the bugs that we need to fix would be the most relief to support or reduce your ticket count or make you less embarrassed. Notice we prioritize within the slice. We go back to engineering and we say, okay, we have a budget, we have a pie slice, we have a limit, and we're going to put 5 developer days against something that you guys want, like refactoring. So within that, what do we think the refactoring is that would have the highest improvement or ROI for engineering's velocity, right? For customer success, if that's post-sale installation, right? What are the few top blockers to getting customers on board? And we'll fit that within a slice, okay? Now, if you were paying attention, you notice that the sales team wants the whole pie. So I have a different suggestion that I've tried over the years with sales teams. And you have to, by the way, be the senior product executive to do this. But at a few of my startups, we've done the following deal. I gave the head of sales a small physical token. I called it the magic bullet. And that physical token was good for 1 engineer week every quarter for whatever the sales VP or chief revenue officer wanted. What that meant, though, was that every one of the sales teams would come to me and I would send them back to the head of sales and say, well, if you can convince your boss that your deal is the one that's going to bring in the most money for the least effort, we'll do it, right? And that worked really well because it got someone at the revenue level who wanted to maximize revenue for the company. The reason for the physical token was that sales VP will give me that token in week 2 of the quarter and then try to use it again in weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If we have a little physical token, I can put it back in my desk, and then the sales VP suddenly remembers that that's already been done for the quarter. Okay, almost there. I'm going to skip through this because I think it's not really necessary. There's a long post of mine about deli counters that I'll share the link with later. But this is just a little Kanban chart that I use with execs to help remind them what's in plan. I notice that almost always when there's a new request from my executive team, they've forgotten what's already on the roadmap. They've forgotten what we've committed to customers, and they've forgotten that just yesterday they made a different choice. So some kind of very simple status or Kanban chart is really going to be better than spreadsheets. Nobody will ever follow your links to Jira or any of the product management software. Execs don't care. They just want what they want. Okay, so coming to the end here, how about some takeaways before we get to Q&A? I will observe here very carefully that if you're in a product job, you have to understand the behavior of your constituents, of your stakeholders, of your customers. It's not enough to show them spreadsheets. It's not enough to show them algorithms. If I'm a salesperson who's going to get fired if I don't close this deal this quarter, then I don't care what's on your spreadsheets. I'll go over your head to your boss to get the thing needed that I approve or that I need. So we as product managers have to be more than just algorithm makers and story writers. We actually have to understand the organizational behavior in the companies we live in. Okay, so recognize each group. As we went through those, you can see that the biases, the selection models, the thinking of each functional group is quite predictable. And you should start to recognize it because that'll help you unpack what they're asking for, right? Somewhere in there here, you need to get an executive level, V level, C level, managing director level agreement for how much of engineering is going to be for infrastructure and support and how much of it's going to be for new features. Without that executive agreement, we'll be lost because every single ticket gets handled separately. Okay, third, phrase of mine, roadmap amnesia. As many times as I show the roadmap to my executive team, I expect to have it with me again tomorrow because it's not what they think about. And whenever there's a shiny new deal, it erases their brains and they forget what's on the roadmap. So don't be offended. Don't be surprised. Don't think they're doing this to make you unhappy. Just understand that many executives have roadmap amnesia. Okay, last two. So therefore, both product managers, product owners, and whoever your most senior product executive is, have to push for trade-offs, right? We have to allocate within a pie slice, and we have to push as hard as we can to get the best choices made for the right stakeholders and the right customers in each allocation or category or pie slice. Okay, I think we got one more here, right? And then if we can find ways for our internal stakeholders to help us, that's great. They'll share the pain. It doesn't always work, but this is a way to get buy-in and better decisions without trading off the goodness and health of our products. Okay, here's how to find me. I'm going to back up in a sec so we can continue to see those takeaways. That's my office manager with me. And anybody from Eastern Europe or further may recognize that last name. I bought the domain in 1993, long before most of the world was on the internet. Okay, so back to here for our takeaways. And then I think we're done with the slides. I do have these for distribution. So let's open this up for some questions.
Thanks so much, Rich. Before we dive into Q&A, I'd like to just remind everyone to head over to the Q&A tab. Make sure you share your questions for Rich. I'll help by reading them out. Also take some time to go over to the polls tab and let us know how you feel the talk has gone. I'll also take a moment while the questions start to come in to show the gift we'll be sending to Rich as a thank you for his great talk. Thank you so much, Rich.
Lovely, thanks. And I think I'm going to turn my screen share off so we can see each other. How's that?
Sounds great.
Okay, good. All right, fire when ready.
Great. So as a first question, you talked quite a bit about how you would use the pie chart as a kind of more of a conversational tool with some of these different stakeholders. I wonder if you've had any success stories in using it in more of a broadcast mode, maybe as part of a roadmap or some other similar artifact. I wonder if you can share some of those stories.
Sure. I think that's very true. It's useful, particularly for the groups that feel like they're not getting what they need, right? Because it's a chance to show them that other parts of the company and other parts of the customer base are being served as well as they are. I don't find that it settles any arguments, because each of those groups really still wants what they want, which is at least 100% of the pie. In fact, they'll tell me they each want 160% of the pie. Where it's more useful, I think, is with the sales side of the house at the executive level, where we look at last quarter and we notice that no matter what we planned, we spent 70% of the company's energy on features and specials. And then I get to scold them about how that might put us out of business in 2 quarters. And we put some new processes in place to review that. But it's really an executive level tool so that we can have a healthy product set.
And when having those conversations, maybe with the sales team or even with the sales leader, have you had any success in actually circling back and getting down to the numbers and talking about the actual outcomes of those fast requests?
In fact, one of the things that's really most useful here is if we go back a quarter and we look at the things that the sales team got approved, and then we match money against it. So a quarter ago, we convinced ourselves that this new feature was going to bring in 300,000 euros worth of something, right? When I bring back last quarter's choices, what happens is sales finally realizes that they have a limited number of picks, of options, and if they choose badly, they don't make enough money, right? So I go back and I find those things that we did and discover that no one's using them, or the deal didn't close, or it closed for a very small amount of money, and they could have chosen things that would have delivered a lot more revenue to the company and therefore more quota to the salespeople, which is what they care about. So it's the details, it's the history, it's showing them the results of the choices they made that gets them thinking harder about the next set of choices.
I wonder if you've had any interesting experience in reconciling a system like this, so a way of dividing up capacity like this, with something like OKRs, which is the latest trendy way
Sure.
people talk about goals, and how you've seen that best reconciled.
Yeah, I think they work nicely together, but the OKRs are actually different in each of those pie slices or allocations. So for the feature set, it's almost always an OKR around customer adoption or customer revenue or reduction of churn, right? And those naturally compete with each other because we're going to spend half of our engineering on making the product visibly better, reducing churn, improving workflows, et cetera, adding features. So the OKRs around revenue and adoption go in one slice. On the other side, we should probably have some OKRs around system reliability, scalability, performance, security. Those OKRs aren't of interest to the sales side of the house. But if we don't have them, we'll end up with pretty broken, crappy software. So the OKRs, I think, fall out of the higher level strategy that says, for instance, we're going to do a few special things for customers, but not too many. So I don't see a conflict there, but I see that if you just start with OKRs and don't think about the different stakeholders, we almost always end up with pure revenue OKRs. And we end up with broken, old, badly platformed software.
Got that. And then, so it's obviously easier to have these conversations the more senior you are in an organization, the more trust you've built up. Do you have any tips for a more junior PM, someone newer to the organization, on how to approach these tough conversations with big stakeholders?
Yeah, I generally encourage the junior product folks and the new ones in that job not to try to change the executive's mind. What they want to do is they want to figure out who the most senior, the most executive level person is who actually understands product. Ideally, that's a head of product or chief product officer, and gather the data. Again, back to selection bias and amnesia. What I find is that the go-to-market side of the house keeps forgetting the choices they've made, and they keep forgetting the things that are in the roadmap. And so when I'm in that executive product chair, what I ask of my product managers, product owners, is to get me good evidence, get me good data, so that we can then convince the executive team again that we're off strategy. And so bring me the names of the last 5 features we built that didn't get any users, but we did them because sales teams demanded them, right? So that we can remind everybody, not in the abstract, not philosophy, but look, here's 6 things we built as requested with quality on time that didn't lead to revenue, right? That's how we move the discussion from I want engineering to work faster to we need a strategy.
Yeah, totally. A question from Edith here. What kind of trick might help to align stakeholders while we're still in discovery, when we don't really have past decisions to point at, because we are there to establish product and design concepts?
Right. I think there's 2 cases here. One is it's a very new company and we don't have very many customers, right? And it's going to be a lot looser and less perfect there because the 2 or 3 customers we have are probably not representative of the market. They happen to be the first 2 or 3 that we got. So we're going to lean more on market surveys. One of the techniques I like a lot is to interview or survey large groups of people who haven't bought yet, but are in our target market, because we want to find out what's true in the larger market, not just with the 2 customers we have. The other thing is that companies that are doing product thinking or product led for the first time don't really understand this. And so rather than trying to change the whole company, what I would do is I would focus on the next 1 or 2 decisions. And let's see if we can do something with a small amount of research and a small amount of validation, get 1 decision made well, This, by the way, is what we would call the agile approach to everything, right? Do it once, do it twice, show that it works, and then we can explain the technique or the philosophy. I've never found executives very interested in Scrum or Agile or anything else. They don't care. What they want is to get things to market. So we have to pilot or experiment or prove that our next improvement is going to work. And then we can tell the rest of the stakeholders what it was and why we did it, right? Let's sell the outcome, the results, rather than the process descriptions.
Thank you.
Sure.
I've heard of organizations where there's always a little bit of tension on who represents the voice of customer. I'm totally asking for a friend based on your laughter. Yeah, so there tends to be a little bit of tension between who understands voice of customer best, to the point where it's sometimes recommended that product managers actually should participate in sales calls rather than research calls, because that's really the front line of where customers are giving their feedback. I'm curious, in your experience as a head of product, how you handle some of those situations, if you've ever had them, and how you kind of bring things back to a more balanced view.
Sure. And again, most of my career has been in enterprise software. Every single enterprise software in the world has a sales team that believes that they are the voice of the customer, right? So let's take this in two pieces. First of all, product managers should help on sales calls. And they should help on sales calls because it's going to bring money into the company, not because we're going to learn anything, right? The nature of sales calls is we don't want to ask open-ended questions. We don't want to learn about new customer problems. What we want to do on sales calls is convince the customer that we already can solve the problem they have, right? So that's important, but it's long past the discovery stage, right? And good salespeople will never ask a question that encourages customers to raise new issues, which is exactly what we want in our interviews, in our validations, in our discoveries. We're doing exactly the opposite of what we do in sales calls. We're asking what they tried and what didn't work and things that make them unhappy and how much they're willing to pay, and to watch them do their work. So what's important there is a discovery call has entirely different sets of questions and inputs than sales calls, right? And I sometimes invite salespeople to listen in on mute. They're not allowed to speak on the interviews, the discovery calls with folks in their customers or markets, because they learn things. And that separation is that product managers, product owners do help sell, but selling's not learning. In fact, selling is the opposite of learning. And so we as product folks have to help on the selling side, but separately, we have to do discovery. And I have that wrestling match as the head of product with every sales VP who hasn't done this more than once or twice. The experienced ones know this is true.
Right. So I think another interesting challenge, both for kind of companies which are definitely higher on the B2B side of things, but also for more consumer-oriented companies, is reconciling the customers you have with the customers you want to have, and you probably have access to, you have very different access to those at different points in time in the company's life cycle. What's your experience in going about that, and how to make sure to evenly meet the needs of today with the future there?
Right. Actually, let's talk about three groups. Let's talk about the customers we have that we want to keep, the customers we have that are completely the wrong customers and are failing and are leading us in the wrong direction, and we would like to fire them or let them churn away, your choice, and the customers we want who are not yet customers, right? So every time we're gathering information from the market, we need to be thinking about who we're speaking with, right? So good techniques for current customers who we want to keep. I like one-on-one, interviews, product manager leading, although it's not really one-on-one, because in the back, I almost always have a designer and a developer joining the call, sending me notes by Slack, helping me get the right questions asked, right? So for customers who we want to keep in our hours, I'm a strong believer in a 30 to 60 minute deep dive, interrogation, right? For customers that are not yet our customers, but we think we want, really two techniques. One is sometimes we do surveys. I'm deeply suspicious of surveys because people tend to answer the quickest, easiest answer, and the most interested ones are the ones who respond. So not so good. But we can hire a market research firm or a recruiting firm to find us, let's say, 20 or 30 prospects, people who look like the customers we want, but are not yet customers. We probably have to pay them for their time and thank them. And in those discussions, we want to say as little as possible because we're trying to learn and listen and get them to tell us things, right? And then the third group, the ones we want to get rid of, I'm not really sure I need to interview them. The people I need to sell are the folks who are the sales and marketing and support teams who brought them in, and I have to sell internally letting them go. But again, we each have our selection bias, and the smarter we are as product folks about understanding who we're speaking with at this very moment and what their slant or selection is, the more likely we can have a balanced view of the market.
Yeah, yeah, and that's particularly challenged because sometimes the loudest customers are also the ones who bring in the least revenue or least aligned with the future strategic direction. So how do you go about having those conversations you mentioned towards the end?
Actually, I think there's a bimodal distribution here. The loudest voices are your three largest customers who don't bother talking to product managers. They pick up the phone or send an email to your CEO demanding things, right? And the least valuable customers, as you've seen, who pay us very little money, they may even be on our freemium plan and give us nothing, but they have a lot of commentary, they have a lot of input. So we need to weigh those against the larger economics and revenue of the company. So generally, the good stuff is in the middle, right? We want hundreds of enterprise customers or tens of thousands of consumers who use exactly the same product that we built on exactly the same platform with no modifications and nothing special. And I'd much rather close 500 more consumers who want what we built than to chase around 3 consumers who want something else. So we as product folks have to think about the revenue and the economics of, are we a bespoke firm building for our 3 largest customers, or are we trying to close 100 more mid-sized businesses on the thing that we actually already built and could ship today? So these are all trade-offs. These are all exchanges, right? There is no perfect answer. There is no magic solution. As product folks, we spend all day making trade-offs between good things.
And is that then a quantified conversation, something where you bring numbers to the table, or is that sometimes more of an emotional conversation? And how?
Well, emotional is not going to get us very far. I have a post, and if you'll remind me later, I'll send the URL, called "Business Cases Are Stories About Money." Right? An important skill of every product person is they can chase down one of these things, and it doesn't have to be exact. The way I think of it is, we talk about count the digits, okay? Is this a 10,000 euro opportunity, a 100,000 euro opportunity, a million euro opportunity? Because if it's a 10,000 euro opportunity, I don't care and we're not doing it, right? And so, and you and I and every product person should be able to do that with no more than 3 numbers that we multiply. The number of customers who we think want it, the price, and whatever penetration we're going to get into that group. We multiply them together, we get some value, and we can then quickly compare the 100 things on our list and only spend the energy on the top 4, because everything else is never going to get done.
And as you go through this exercise, there are always times where you need to redistribute the pie slicing algorithm a little bit,
Yes.
a little bit more unfairly towards some of the stakeholders. How do you go about communicating that? How do you go about managing that operationally so you don't lose
Right.
long-term stability on that?
Sure. And I think that's really a top level company strategy question. So for instance, we might have had a very difficult last 2 quarters where our back-end system is crashing and we don't have enough throughput, and customers are abandoning us because our platform is not stable, right? That's a hint that for the next quarter, or maybe even 2 quarters, we're going to overweight the infrastructure slice and we're going to steal from the specials and the features, right? But we should make a really clear agreement between engineering and the rest of the company that if we do that for a quarter, we think that's enough to recover, and we can't go 100%. Any solution that's 100% is wrong here, right? So we might go from 40% to 50% for a quarter, maybe 2. Then we have to take that 10% away from someone, right? And so this is a very emotional discussion. Again, I see this discussion happening around the executive table, not down at the bottom of the org chart, where one new product owner is trying to convince a senior vice president or managing director that they can't have what they want, right? So we have to understand where the company is. If we're only signed up our first 2 customers, gosh, the next year is going to be doing special things and hoping that the market wants them. So we're going to pile up tech debt for the first 6 months of our startup, because if nobody buys it, the tech debt doesn't matter, right? But as we come into our market growth phase, we've got to readjust and rebalance so that our customers don't walk away for lack of infrastructure, right? So again, we're asking it at a company strategy level rather than at a ticket level, because at the ticket level, we never resolve.
Is there any risk of this kind of strategy resulting in teams being too stretched too thin if they're taking on multiple things for serving the needs of so many different stakeholders?
Well, first, let's admit every one of our teams is overextended. Every one of our teams has too much to do. So this is not a new problem. What this lets us do, though, is it lets the product manager make choices such that in each sprint we have 3 bugs to fix and 1 or 2 features to work on and a little bit of technical debt to retire and some discovery, right? So what we want is we want a balanced plan. We want that balanced plan to be about the right, workload for our team, because overextended, frustrated, tired teams do bad work and they quit, right? But what we want to avoid, and my job here and every product manager's job, is to keep the organization from shifting to 90% of one thing and 10% of everything else, right? So a balanced plan here, a balanced portfolio says roughly a third on infrastructure and quality and roughly half on features, and then the other pieces pick up, so that we don't end up in a place where it all falls apart.
Thank you so much, Rich. Thanks for the great talk, the great answers. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon or evening wherever you are, and drop me a line if there's something I can do to be of help.